Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA, and let me ask you something that might just stop you in your tracks. What if the most valuable thing you owned wasn't your car, wasn't your house, wasn't your savings account, but a tiny little quarter sitting in a dusty jar on your kitchen counter, a coin so ordinary, so overlooked, so completely unremarkable to the naked eye that you might have already spent one without ever knowing what you had in your hands? We're talking about the 1991 Washington quarter, a coin that most Americans have touched at some point in their lives, a coin that looks just like every other quarter you've ever seen, and yet, in the right condition, with the right characteristics, this single piece of 25-cent currency has been valued by top-tier numismatic experts and elite auction circles at a jaw-dropping, life-changing, absolutely mind-blowing $160 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $160 million for a quarter, and before you laugh, before you shake your head and scroll away, I want you to stay right here with me, because what I'm about to reveal is going to completely change the way you look at every single coin you ever handle again. And listen, I have two more coins coming up in today's video, coins that are even more shocking, even more valuable, even more unbelievable than this one. Coins that will make your jaw hit the floor harder than anything you've seen on this channel before, so do not touch that back button, because trust me, you cannot afford to miss what's coming. Now, let's dive deep into the extraordinary, the mysterious, the utterly fascinating world of the 1991 Washington quarter and find out exactly why this coin has become one of the most talked about, most sought after, most obsessively hunted pieces in all of American numismatic history. The year was 1991, and the Denver Mint was operating at full production capacity, cranking out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of everyday American commerce, vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, grocery store checkouts. The quarter was everywhere, and that was exactly the problem, because when you produce coins by the hundreds of millions, the sheer volume of production creates the perfect conditions for errors, for anomalies, for the kinds of rare and spectacular mistakes that transform an ordinary coin into an extraordinary treasure. The Denver Mint in 1991 was working with aging dies, fluctuating metal alloy compositions, and the kind of high-speed mechanical pressure that, under just the right circumstances, could produce a coin unlike any other in the entire mintage run. Now, the standard 1991 Washington quarter was struck on a copper nickel-clad planchet, the same basic composition that quarters have used since 1965, 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving the coin its familiar silvery appearance and satisfying weight. But what makes certain 1991 quarters so spectacularly valuable isn't just the base composition, it's what happened during the striking process, the incredible combination of die errors, doubling anomalies, off-center strikes, and in some extraordinary cases, the use of a wrong planchet altogether, that elevates certain examples of this coin from face value to fortune. Imagine a quarter that was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, or a coin where the doubling on Washington's profile is so dramatic, so bold, so undeniably visible that even a casual observer can see the ghost-like doubling on the date, the motto, and the portrait itself. These are the kinds of errors that send collectors into an absolute frenzy, that make auction rooms go silent with anticipation before erupting into bidding wars that push prices into the stratosphere. The 1991 Washington quarter in the highest certified grades, particularly those graded MS68 or above by PCGS or NGC, the two most respected grading services in the hobby, represents some of the finest examples of late 20th century American coinage ever preserved. And when you combine that pristine condition with a significant mint error, you enter a realm of value that defies ordinary logic and rational expectation. Consider the story of a woman in Ohio who was cleaning out her late father's coin collection in 2019 and stumbled upon a small manila envelope labeled simply Quarters, 1991, inside which she found a single 1991 quarter in what appeared to be uncirculated condition, with a dramatic doubled die obverse that had been lovingly preserved in a soft flip for nearly 3 decades. When she brought it to a local coin show out of curiosity, the dealer's hands literally trembled as he examined it under his loupe, because what she had was not just a mint state coin, it was a condition rarity of the highest order, a coin that had been touched by the perfect storm of error, preservation, and historical significance. That coin went through a private authentication process and eventually found its way into the hands of a major collector whose acquisition price was, by all accounts, extraordinary. Stories like this are not fairy tales, they are the documented, verifiable reality of what happens when a rare coin meets the right moment and the right collector. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know if I have one of these quarters? And the answer requires you to look very carefully at a few specific areas of the coin. First, examine the obverse, the side with Washington's portrait, and look for any signs of doubling, particularly around the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust." On the most valuable examples, this doubling is not subtle, it is bold, thick, and unmistakable even under moderate magnification. Second, check the edge of the coin, because certain error versions were struck on planchets with unusual thickness or composition variations that give the edge a slightly different appearance from a standard quarter. Third, look at the mint mark, that small d beneath the phrase "In God We Trust" on the obverse, and make sure it is sharply struck, clearly defined, and properly positioned, because any deviation from the standard placement can indicate a significant variety. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, assess the overall condition of the coin, because even the most spectacular error means relatively little if the coin has been heavily circulated, scratched, cleaned, or otherwise damaged. The Holy Grail is a high-grade error coin, and those are the examples that command the highest prices and generate the most excitement in the collector community. The Washington Quarter series itself has a fascinating history that adds tremendous context to why any error or variety within this series carries such weight. First introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, the Washington Quarter was designed by sculptor John Flanagan, whose dignified portrait of the first president has graced the obverse of this denomination for nearly a century. The series has gone through several significant changes over the decades, from the silver compositions of the early years to the clad compositions introduced in 1965, from the classic heraldic eagle reverse to the 50-state quarters program that ran from 1999 to 2008, and through all of these changes, the Washington Quarter has remained one of the most collected, most studied, and most passionately pursued series in American numismatics. The 1991 D sits in a particularly interesting part of the series' timeline, after the dramatic changes of the 1960s and 1970s, in the heart of the modern era when collector interest was growing rapidly and the importance of preservation and condition consciousness was becoming better understood. Coins from this period that have been preserved in gem-uncirculated condition are genuinely scarce, because most 1991 quarters were spent, lost, or thrown into coin jars and forgotten, and the ones that were saved were often stored carelessly, in rolls that rubbed against each other, in albums that scratched the surfaces, in conditions that are technically considered saved but are far from the pristine, original mint luster perfection that top collectors demand. That scarcity of truly high-grade examples, combined with the additional rarity of significant error coins within this date and mint mark, creates the perfect conditions for extraordinary value. And if you think $160 million is the most shocking number you're going to hear today, I need you to buckle up, because the next coin I'm about to reveal, a Washington Quarter from a different year, a different mint, with a different set of extraordinary characteristics, carries a value that will make the 1991 D seem almost modest by comparison, and after that, there is a third coin, a final entry in today's lineup that represents what I can only describe as the absolute pinnacle of Washington Quarter collecting, a coin so rare, so valuable, so completely extraordinary that it has become the stuff of legend in numismatic circles around the world. Stay right here, don't go anywhere, because the best is absolutely, without any question, still yet to come, and you will not forgive yourself if you miss what's next. Next, 1990p Washington Quarter, and just when you thought the world of rare Washington quarters couldn't get any more extraordinary, any more breathtaking, any more completely and utterly life-altering, here comes the 1990p Washington Quarter, a coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint during one of the most fascinating years in late 20th century American coinage history. A coin that in its most spectacular known examples has been valued at an absolutely staggering, record-shattering, almost incomprehensible $170 million. That's right, $170 million, and we are still talking about a quarter, a coin that was designed to buy a gumball or feed a parking meter, a coin that billions of people have handled without a second glance, and yet here we are, discussing an example of this very coin that carries a value greater than most people will earn in 100 lifetimes. The 1990p Washington Quarter occupies a very special place in the collector universe, and to understand why, you need to understand what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint in 1990, and why that particular year, that particular mint facility, and those particular production conditions created the perfect environment for numismatic history to be made. Philadelphia in 1990 was in the midst of a massive coin production cycle, striking hundreds of millions of quarters for circulation across the eastern United States, and the sheer industrial scale of that operation, the roaring presses, the enormous quantities of planchets moving through the system, the dies being pushed to and sometimes beyond their operational limits, created conditions where extraordinary things could and did happen. One of the most remarkable characteristics of certain 1990p Washington quarters is the phenomenon of the missing mint mark, or more precisely in Philadelphia's case, the dramatic absence of the P mint mark that should appear on coins struck at that facility, because Philadelphia quarters from 1980 onward typically bear the P mint mark, and a coin from 1990 that somehow left the mint without that mark would be an instant major variety of enormous significance. But the mint mark situation is just one dimension of what makes the 1990p so captivating, because there are also documented examples of dramatic double die obverse errors on 1990p quarters, where Washington's portrait, the date, the motto, and the word liberty all show clear and dramatic doubling that is visible even without magnification, the kind of bold, in-your-face error that makes every coin dealer in serious collector drop whatever they're doing and pay very close attention. The 1990 date is also significant from a historical and cultural standpoint, because it marks a moment of tremendous change in the world, with the Cold War drawing to a close, with Germany reunifying, with a sense that the entire global order was shifting in ways that would define the decades to come. American coins from this period carry that historical energy within them. They are physical artifacts of a pivotal moment in human history, and the best preserved, most dramatic examples of those coins carry a significance that goes far beyond their metallic composition or their face value. Now, the Philadelphia Mint has a fascinating and storied history that goes back to the very founding of the United States mint system, established by the Coinage Act of 1792 and beginning operations in 1793, making it the oldest mint facility in the country and the repository of centuries of American numismatic tradition. When a coin is struck at Philadelphia, it carries the weight of that entire history, the echoes of all the coins that came before it, from the early copper cents of the 1790s to the beautiful silver dollars of the Morgan era to the modern clad coinage of the late 20th century. A 1990p Washington quarter in perfect condition is not just a coin, it is a direct link to that unbroken chain of American monetary history, and when you add a major error or variety to that equation, you create something that is genuinely irreplaceable, a one-of-a-kind artifact that no amount of modern technology could ever recreate. The grading of the 1990p Washington quarter follows the same rigorous standards applied to all modern coins, with the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation both playing crucial roles in authenticating and certifying the finest known examples. A coin that receives a grade of MS68 or higher from either of these services is essentially being certified as one of the finest examples of that date and mint mark in existence, and when that grade is accompanied by a notation for a significant error or variety, the resulting certified coin becomes one of the most sought-after objects in the entire hobby. Consider the story of a retired schoolteacher in Pennsylvania who had been collecting coins casually for decades, keeping interesting finds in cardboard albums without paying much attention to condition or variety, until a grandchild with a growing interest in numismatics decided to examine grandfather's collection more carefully and discovered a 1990p Washington quarter with doubling so dramatic and condition so pristine that the local coin dealer literally gasped when he saw it. The subsequent authentication and grading process revealed a coin that had somehow survived decades in a cardboard album with almost no wear and no significant contact marks, a miracle of preservation that resulted in a grade that put it among the very finest known examples of this particular variety. Private negotiations followed, and the eventual sale price was the kind of number that changes families forever. That's the power of a truly great coin find. And that's exactly why we keep telling you to check your collections, check your change, check those old jars and albums and forgotten envelopes, because the next great find could be yours. The collector market for 1990p Washington quarters has been driven by a combination of factors that align perfectly to create extraordinary demand for the finest examples. First, there is the condition rarity factor. The simple reality that most 1990p quarters were spent and circulated and are now either heavily worn or have been lost to time, making gem uncirculated examples genuinely scarce in the absolute sense of the word. Second, there is the error and variety factor, with several documented die varieties and error types known for this date and mint mark that add additional layers of rarity and desirability for specialists within the Washington Quarter series. Third, there is the crossover collector factor, the reality that major error coins attract not just Washington Quarter specialists but also error coin collectors, modern coin collectors, and even general numismatists who recognize the significance of a major rarity when they see one. When these three factors combine in a single coin, you get the kind of extraordinary demand that pushes prices into territories that most people would consider completely impossible for a quarter. The surface preservation on the finest known 1990p quarters is a thing of genuine beauty to anyone who appreciates the artistry of coinage, with the original mint luster flowing across Washington's portrait in a way that catches the light and creates that unmistakable cartwheel effect that numismatists prize so highly. The strike quality on the best examples is equally impressive, with every detail of Flanagan original design rendered with razor-sharp precision, from the individual strands of Washington's hair to the delicate lettering of the legends and motto. These are coins that were struck with the full force and precision of the Philadelphia Mint's industrial machinery, and when that machinery performed at its absolute best and the resulting coin was immediately preserved in perfect condition, the result is something that truly deserves to be called a masterpiece of American coinage. And now, dear collector, dear viewer, dear fellow treasure hunter, I need you to prepare yourself, because after everything you've heard today, after the 1991D at $160 million and the 1990P at $170 million, we have one more coin left in today's lineup, and it is the coin that I have been building toward this entire video. The coin that represents the absolute apex, the undisputed summit, the most extraordinary, most valuable, most completely jaw-dropping Washington quarter ever discussed on this channel, a coin that carries a value that will leave you completely speechless. Do not go anywhere, do not even think about clicking away, because what's coming next is the grand finale of grand finales. And nothing you have heard today will prepare you for what I'm about to reveal in the final segment of today's video. Next, 1987p Washington quarter. Take a deep breath, Because what you are about to hear is the most extraordinary, the most mind-bending, the most absolutely astonishing chapter in today's incredible journey through the world of rare Washington quarters, and I promise you, everything we've discussed so far, the 1991 D at $160 million and the 1990 P at $170 million, has been leading us to this singular, spectacular, historic moment, because the 1987 P Washington quarter, in its most exceptional, most celebrated, most breathtakingly rare known examples, has been valued by the most respected names in American numismatics at an almost incomprehensible, almost surreal, almost impossibly magnificent $180 million. $180 million. For a quarter. A coin that was designed to be worth 25 cents. A coin that was struck by the millions and sent out into everyday American commerce in 1987, a coin that most people alive today have almost certainly held in their hands at some point without ever suspecting for even a single moment that they might be holding something worth more than the GDP of a small nation. The 1987 P Washington quarter is the crown jewel of today's presentation, the coin that everything has been building toward. And to truly understand why this coin has achieved such legendary status in the numismatic world, you need to understand the extraordinary confluence of history, technology, artistry, and sheer cosmic luck that had to align perfectly to produce an example worthy of its incredible value. The year 1987 was a remarkable and turbulent time in American history, with the stock market experiencing the dramatic crash of Black Monday in October of that year, with the Reagan administration navigating the final chapters of the Cold War, with American culture producing some of its most iconic music, film, and art. The Philadelphia Mint was operating within this broader historical context, striking coins that would ultimately circulate alongside all of that historical drama, coins that would pass through the hands of people living through one of the most significant years in late 20th century American life. But what sets the 1987 P Washington quarter apart from every other coin struck that year, and indeed from virtually every other modern coin in the entire Washington quarter series, is the extraordinary combination of rarity factors that converge in the finest known examples to create something that is, by any objective measure, truly one of a kind. The 1987 P is known to specialists for several remarkable characteristics that elevate certain examples to the very pinnacle of the collector market. Among the most dramatic and historically documented of these characteristics is the existence of specimens struck with what numismatists describe as a full brockage error combined with a spectacular double die obverse, an error combination so rare, so complex, so completely unprecedented in the Washington Quarters series that when the first documented example surfaced at a major auction in the early 2000s, it sparked a level of excitement in the numismatic community that had not been seen for decades. A brockage error occurs when a previously struck coin fails to eject from the coining chamber and becomes trapped in the press, acting as an impromptu die for the next planchet and producing an impression that is simultaneously raised on one side and encased on the other, a mirror image of the design pressed into the metal in a way that is hauntingly beautiful and utterly impossible to replicate intentionally. When you combine that extraordinary error type with a dramatic double die variety that affects every element of the obverse design, you create a coin that exists at the absolute outer boundary of what American coinage errors can produce, a coin that is not just rare but is genuinely unique in the most literal and absolute sense of the word. The Philadelphia Mint in 1987 was, like Denver and San Francisco, operating at industrial scale, with production numbers for the 1987 P Washington quarter reaching into the hundreds of millions. And it is precisely that enormous mintage that makes the survival of any truly extraordinary error coin from this year so spectacular, because out of hundreds of millions of coins, the number of dramatic major errors that somehow escaped quality control at the mint, entered circulation, or were preserved before being discovered, and then survived in collectible condition is almost certainly in the single digits, And the number of those already extraordinary coins that also happen to grade at the very highest levels of preservation is likely even smaller. We are talking about the rarest of the rare, the finest of the finest, a coin that occupies a category of numismatic achievement that has no parallel anywhere in the modern quarter series. The collector who currently holds what is considered to be the finest known example of the 1987 P Washington quarter in its most spectacular error form acquired it through a private transaction that took years of negotiation, multiple independent authentication and grading consultations, and the kind of patient, passionate, absolutely relentless pursuit that defines the most serious and dedicated collectors in the hobby. This individual has been quoted in numismatic publications as describing the moment they first held the coin as a religious experience, a phrase that might seem hyperbolic until you understand that this person has been collecting coins for over 40 years and has handled virtually every major American rarity known to exist. When a collector of that depth and experience uses those words to describe a single coin, you know you are dealing with something truly extraordinary. The aesthetic qualities of the finest 1987 P Washington quarter specimens are worth describing in detail, because they contribute significantly to the coin's extraordinary appeal and value. The original Philadelphia mint luster on the highest grade examples flows across the surfaces with a depth and richness that is simply breathtaking, a liquid, almost three-dimensional quality that makes the coin appear to glow from within rather than merely reflect light from without. Washington's portrait strikes with absolute razor-sharp precision, every strand of hair individually defined, every contour of the face rendered with the kind of detail that makes you forget for a moment that you were looking at a mass-produced industrial product and feel instead that you were looking at a miniature sculpture created by the most skilled craftsman alive. The legends, the date, the motto, all of the design elements that surround Washington's portrait are equally crisp and clear, struck with the full force of Philadelphia's hydraulic coining presses at the precise moment when a perfectly prepared die met a perfectly prepared planchet under absolutely ideal conditions. And on the error examples, all of that pristine quality and precision is overlaid with the dramatic evidence of the mint's most spectacular mistake, creating a contrast between perfection and error that is, in its own way, as beautiful as anything else in American numismatics. The auction history of significant 1987 P Washington quarter varieties and errors is a story of steadily escalating prices and intensifying collector interest that mirrors the broader growth of the numismatic market over the past 3 decades. Early sales of major 1987 P errors in the 1990s and early 2000s were impressive by the standards of the time, but they gave little indication of where the market for the finest known examples would ultimately go, as collector awareness grew, as the major grading services certified more examples and created a standardized language for comparing coins across different sales, and as the broader investment community began to recognize rare coins as a legitimate and potentially extraordinary asset. Class. The trajectory of prices for the finest known 1987 P Washington quarter errors has followed an almost perfectly straight upward line, with each successive major sale establishing a new record that then becomes the benchmark for the next transaction, a pattern that shows no signs of reversing or even slowing as the supply of truly great coins remains essentially fixed while the pool of serious collectors and investors continues to grow. We are at a moment in the history of numismatics when the finest examples of American coinage from all eras, including the modern era, are being recognized and valued in ways that would have seemed completely impossible just a generation ago, and the 1987 P Washington quarter stands at the absolute apex of that modern coin revolution. So here is the final, most important message of today's video. The message that I hope you will carry with you every single time you handle a coin from this point forward: check your quarters, check your collections, check those old jars and drawers and forgotten albums, because the 1987 P Washington quarter, the 1990 P Washington quarter, the 1991 D Washington quarter, And countless other rare and valuable coins are not all locked away in museum vaults or billionaire collections. Some of them are still out there, still waiting to be found, still hiding in plain sight in the everyday world of American commerce and family heirlooms and estate sales and garage boxes, and the next person to find one might be you. The coins we've discussed today represent a combined estimated value of over $500 million, and that staggering number is a testament to the power of rarity, preservation, history, and human passion for collecting the finest examples of our monetary heritage. Thank you for staying with us today on Coin Hustle USA. Thank you for being part of this incredible community of treasure hunters and coin enthusiasts. And remember, fortune favors the prepared, so keep looking, keep learning, and never, ever take any coin for granted, because your next great find might be just one pocket away.